charging higher rates of interest. So what's it going to be, Ron Paul? Where are you? Why don't you crawl out of the woodwork and explain these things to us? So we go through this Reagan administration, and next thing you know, there's a rift in the Reagan administration. David Stockman, who's the math guru of the Reagan administration, resigns as a result of this rift. Well, what is published to we the people? And what can we deduce from this? All that we were ever told is that Reagan took Stockman to the woodshed. In other words, he received a paddling. Okay, well, what happened? What happened? Ronald Reagan, when everything started to go downhill against what he'd advocated without qualification, he merely made assertions in line with all these other preposterous claims of so-called economists who are the biggest liars in history. He made claims in line with what they were claiming, and none of these things happened. Instead, we're multiplying debt like quote unquote never before. So what does he have Stockman do? They're revising the formulas by which they had traditionally expressed our economic vitality. So as the plan goes awry to an ever greater degree, Stockman is asked more and more so to revise these formulas. Reagan, quote unquote, takes him to the woodshed. Why? Because Stockman refuses to do it any longer, and he resigns. Okay? So what do we know from that? We know that Reagan failed. He accumulated more debt than any president before him. He tripled the national debt of the entire previous 200 years of this country in 7 years, claiming he was going to balance the federal budget the whole while, and still all of his supporters think he was a great guy. Okay? He couldn't have been a worse failure. So now, we go on and we have, his second term, and I don't hear any more from them, and we have a stock market collapse, which they artificially stop. And what's the solution? They stop program trading. In other words, all these people had developed this logical algorithm by which they wanted out of the market if it tanked out this bad. So they developed computer programs, and I even worked on some of these projects at this time. They developed computer algorithms that would bail them out so that they wouldn't lose their heinies. And so to stop this stock market crash, they just pulled the plug on all the computer trading that's going on, which is basically what all these more intelligent people, they don't have a conclusive explanation for, everything that's awry here, but all these more intelligent people had decided that, if things get this bad, we've got to get out of here. So we're just going to put this trigger in here that we're going to dump IBM if it does this. And we're going to dump all these other things if they do that. And we're going to get out of here with our skins. If we can. We're not going to jump out of a window like happened in 1929. Okay? So they pull the plug on all those guys and they suffer their losses, except that they eliminate them suffering their losses. How? How do they eliminate suffering these losses? Well, the Federal Reserve rescues us. How does the Federal Reserve rescue us? I mean, you can go back and read the 1988 papers and, and the 87 and the 86 papers, and you'll see as this thing continued after it first precipitated, what did they do? What did they do? Oh, the Federal Reserve went and it bought government securities. My goodness. How did it save our butts? So Grandma could save $1 a share on IBM. It saddled the American people with, whatever, several dollars of further debt and all the interest on that forever, multiplying federal debt at an even escalated rate than before, purportedly, so that we fools could think everything was all right, because guess what, ladies and gentlemen, we all believed wrongly that the stock market crash was the cause of the first Great Depression. No, 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 no. That was simply a manifestation, a subsequent condition that precipitated out of this process of inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness. So we go on through time. The first George Bush was uneventful. I didn't really trust that guy. There was no warm interaction between us, although I presented Mathematically Perfected Economy to George H.W. Bush. Well, the Clinton presidency and the other candidates who ran at that election warmed up to this idea much more so. It was received fabulously by Jerry Brown's campaign. In fact, one of his best personal friends, a fellow professor at Santa Rosa State, Professor Montagne Padva, graciously, upon meeting me and having me speak, to these 300 delegates, he bought a $500 plate dinner, so that I could personally present exhaustive papers on Mathematically Perfected Economy to Jerry Brown. Never heard from the guy again. But I still occasionally hear from Montagne Padva. Imagine that. Well, Bill Clinton becomes president, and we have, on the heels of the first Iraq War, and he claims, after receiving my papers on Mathematically Perfected Economy, that he's accomplished something that no American president had ever before accomplished. He's balanced the federal budget. Well, we all believe this lie too. Well, why did we do this? Why did we believe this? Did he raise taxes? No. Did he decrease federal spending? No. How could he have possibly balanced the federal budget? Well, an answer to that question would require a whole other program and would take us off on a tangent. But the basic idea is that no way did he balance the federal budget. But eventually, people came to me, and I was able to pressure out of them an explanation for why the other side of the aisle, that is the right, so-called, allowed Clinton to prevail in this lie. And basically it amounts to an explanation which you will drop your jaw if you ever heard it. But it is a lie, in fact, and and it's something that's so preposterous that we would not even want to think that it's possible that while some smiling figurehead announces to us that he's done something beneficial to us, in fact, he hasn't done it at all. And in fact, that this is not just a preposterous lie, but it's extremely destructive to us. Well, we all are aware, nonetheless, that he did further things. That is, he gutted Social Security, and there's some disputation on, how much he actually gutted Social Security, how it's really and truly been bankrupt ever since that time, and so on and so forth. And to make a long story short, then we go through, George, G.W. Bush's, 2 presidential terms, and now to the Obama administration. Well, how does all this plagiarism and all intertwine with all this? As I said, I'd called the Ron Paul campaign, and then I called, after that, the Dennis Kucinich campaign. And my inquiry or proposition was handled far more professionally at the Kucinich campaign headquarters. My call was immediately escalated to a top person in the campaign, Mr. David Bright, who was a great guy. I started my discussion that I was happy after just getting off the telephone with the Ron Paul campaign to at least talk to someone who was at least named Bright. And I explained this call to this fellow Andrew, and how he denied that there was such a thing as a mathematically perfected economy, and we laughed about the proposition of who would run for president if there wasn't a solution and you couldn't demonstrate it. So we went on, and I explained mathematically perfected economy to him in a very brief time, and this man was just a tremendous audience, grasped the whole thing, realized how important it was, and asked me to send my papers to him immediately, which is electronic at this time. And, of course, so I send all my documentation off to David Bright, who promises to me to send it to his Chicago people, and that I'll hear back from them if they believe that anything that I have to say has any weight at all. Well, you can go to Dennis Kucinich's pages, and you can go to Stephen Zarlinga's pages, one of my most prolific plagiarists, blatant plagiarists. And you will find that the Kucinich campaign's quote-unquote Chicago people are one Stephen Zarlinga. So, what eventually happens then is a proposition of mathematically perfected economy, which to this day I invite Stephen Zarlinga to refute, is cut off from the American people and the world, evidently, by Stephen Zarlinga himself, one of my plagiarists, who wasn't even the original author of the ideas that this economy would inevitably fail, and of course that there is one and one only solution. He advocated 4 or 5% interest rates, which we've already dropped far below. Okay, doesn't end there. I called the Obama campaign, and in fact I participated in some 40 or so Obama forums to present mathematically perfected economy. All the Obama advocates wanted to get him elected first and then talk about mathematically perfected economy, but I developed some very, very good allies within the campaign, and eventually I was offered an opportunity to present mathematically perfected economy to the Obama campaign. This is before he becomes president. So, likewise, zipped up all this same material, sent it off, and guess where that went? To Chicago. And guess what happened with that? Now it's sitting 3 feet from my head right now, still have the unopened envelope. It was returned. Certified delivery, return receipt requested, as confirmed many times in a discussion with the Obama people. All right, it was returned, unopened. How does this happen? If these people had an argument against mathematically perfected economy, where is it? Why aren't you aware that there are in fact multiple solutions to inflation and deflation? Who has ever demonstrated to you that it's even possible to maintain a vital circulation without suffering perpetual multiplication of artificial indebtedness in proportion to that circulation until you succumb to terminal failure? No one can put their finger on those replies which would justify returning this material without even opening it. The only reason that it was returned without even opening it is the people who received it know who I am and what was in it, and that they have no argument against it. And evidently, as that went to Chicago as well, it looks like Stephen Zarlinga, one of my most blatant plagiarists, the so-called author of resurrector of the lost science of money, who could only copy me to the impotent degree that he still advocated interest, okay, and he's cut these things off evidently. I don't know for absolute certain, but I can't imagine, at least on the count of the Kucinich campaign, that it went anywhere but to the so-called American Monetary Institute, which is just Stephen Zarlinga, as I am just, people for Mathematically Perfected Economy. So, in the end, what we have is a tremendous number of plagiarists who at the 11th hour stood up and said, oh, well, it's just a Ponzi scheme, and we're all flocking Ellen Hodgson